Chapter 3. The Selection. The day of selection arrived with a sky the color of unwashed linen. The bell rang longer, as if time itself had to be hammered into the shape required. Girls were lifted from their beds and dressed in white, so bright it made the world around them look gray. The matron's hands moved quick as spiders, braiding hair, smoothing fabric, erasing anything that might be mistaken for a self. In the chapel, incense wrestled with the smell of fear and won by a thin margin. 17 girls stood in the room in 2 rows, like pages in a book the elders had already read. Her stood among them and counted the windows, 7 slits on each side, and then stopped counting because arithmetic, as a way of turning a person into a number, she wanted to be a verb. He stood with the elders, separate even when surrounded. The hood made him symbol more than a man. When the elder spoke, he did not need to. Authority is efficient that way. It can outsource its voice. Her felt him the way one feels a cliff in fog, by the change in the air before it comes into view. The ceremony began with the story everyone knew. The elders told it as if telling could be a true each time. The ancestors, the senses, the narrowing of the world to a point you could balance on a blade. They spoke of women as vessels and men as walls, of children as the proof that God still wished to be remembered in one particular shade. Her listened, maybe not attentively, as she thought of the map in the archives of rivers that refused to hold a straight line. A hymn followed, and the air filled with a harmony carefully claimed of doubt. There came the movement of hands. An elder walked the line, his palm hovering over each bowed head, pausing when a life met the need of a palm, of a plan. Names were not spoken because girls did not have names yet. A finger tapped on the shoulder meant that you were chosen. Another was passed by, not yet. Each tap pressed the life further into the world. When the elder stopped in front of her, she knew it was her time. The room to be so strange, it rearranged itself around the moment. Even the incense held its breath. She kept her head lowered because sometimes defiance is more powerful than hidden in discipline. His hand, no, not his. It was the elder's, hovered, trembled, descended. This one, they said. The word struck like a stamp on a wet clay. The congregation exhaled. The matron's mouth flattened into lines of triumph, too narrow to be joy. He did not move, but something unbearable changed in the set of his shoulders. Her could not tell if the change was satisfaction or burden. She filed the question away. Survival required a library of unanswered questions to consult later. Outside, the town waited to perform belief again. The square became a theater, and the stage directions had been practiced for years. Her was led to the center, the elders lifted their arms. The crowd repeated the lines fed to them. She is chosen. She is his. She will bear the line. The chant built into a wave and broke over her. She braced and they let it pass. Waves do not drown rocks unless rocks consent to them becoming sand. In the moment of the presentation, she expected to feed small. Instead, she felt precise. Rage can be a fog or it can be a lens. As the elder turned her to every quarter of the square, she looked at the faces. She found the ones that watched too hungrily, the ones that watched without seeing, the ones that could not watch at all. She found, too, faces that flickered, tiny betrayals of the mask She stored them all in her memory. If the world was going to insist on being a ledger, she would keep books of her own. After the ceremony, the matrons took her to the binding house to be prepared for what they called the covenant and what her body named as theft. Along the corridor walls hang paintings of pale mothers holding paler infants, all smoothed of edges until they might have been carved from candle wax. Her fingers itched with the urge to draw a mouth on one of the wax faces and see if it learned to speak. They left her in a small room with a narrow bed and instructed her to pray. Prayer here was less conversation than submissive. It was more a task. It was submission. She knelt between a prayer because muscle memories it affords you what they must. But she did not fold her mind. She counted the slats in the shutter, the breaths between footsteps outside, the heartbeats it took for a fear to become a plan. She pressed her palm to her own sternum and felt the clock under her ribs keep a perfect beat to time. When the door opened, he entered. She had been waiting for this moment, not in anticipation, not in regret, but knowing it would come. And so she decided not to do but what to be, which was unowned. He was younger than a symbol should be. Without the hood, he might have been mistaken for any man, if any man in this place were permitted to be mistaken for himself. His eyes were pale, as if the color had been washed out of him by duty. He stood too straight and too still, the way people stand when someone always is watching. For a long moment, they looked at one another. The room, unaccustomed to silence, did not know what to do with this kind. He spoke first. "You understand your place," he said, reciting perhaps the only sentence that role allowed him to say. She felt the words reach her and fall to the floor. She did not bend to pick them up. Instead, she inclined her head, the smallest measure that could still be read as acknowledgement. Let him report obedience. Let the report be true and only from his angle. When he extended his hand, she saw the faint scar along his palm, a pale crescent where a blade had sealed someone else's future years ago. The sight startled her with an empathy she did not want. He was human. Maybe he too had rejected this, but had been told to obey. History makes tools of us, of those who hold it as often as if those it holds. She placed her hand in his briefly as the watchers, who surely are watching, in that moment, would write that the right words in the right columns, that she was doing the right thing by the right man. Then she withdrew and returned to her vigil of counting her breath. Evening slid its shoulder against the window and made a longer shadow of the bed. The matron had arrived with a tray and the bright tone of a voice pretending to be kindness. "Eat," she said, which meant comply. Claire lifted the cup to her mouth and tasted for medicine that would make her complaint in the name of peace. She tasted only the faint tang of copper pipes and the heavier taste of someone else's plan. She drank because she would need strength for whichever kind of night it became. When they left her alone again, she rose and tested the door. It was locked. She knew that, although she knew that already. She tested the window. It was latched. She knew that, although she knew that already. She tested herself. It was unlocked. It was unlatched. She walked the perimeter of the room, touching wall, touching air, convincing her body that it still belonged to her. On the third circuit, she found a place where the wood of the shutter did not sit flush with the frame. Not an opening, but a suggestion. Suggestions of how walls begin to fail. The night brought a choice, not the choice they thought they had granted her between duty and punishment, but the choice between the kind of fury that burns you for heat and the kind that you bank into coals. She chose coals. She chose to glow where they could not see her. She chose to make a promise, not out loud where it could be used against her, but in the language of breath. I will not be emptied. I will not be marked. I will not be renamed. I will not be the proof of someone else's math, someone else's conclusion. In the morning, she would be paraded again before the square for blessings and pronouncements. The matron would press their hands to her shoulder. The elders would deliver paragraphs carved from certainty. Her would stand to the side like a spear resting against the wall as he, too, was paraded with her side by side for what he had achieved, for what he had done. The sun would discover, as always it did, that it does in light, that they were surveyed. In their surveillance, she had come up with a plan. And she would smile, playing the game, playing into it, as if it was truly what she wanted, in the way a blade smiles when he knows it is still sharp inside the sheath. When sleep finally came that later evening, it brought no dreams, only a steady drift across the surface of a decision already made. The bell would ring, as bells do. The people would gather, as people are trained to gather do. And somehow, between the first chant and the last blessing, she would become, in a way none of them could witness, a person who had already left.